But guess what? If your employees are sharing, their clicks are like 90% less. It's actually, there's no cost. Now that AI, the pace at which it is changing our industry significantly, folks want to see and learn how companies are building with AI ethics and safety. Actually, LinkedIn is deprioritizing content from brands when it's coming from an employee, which is, and a human, which is trusted. You gain that authenticity, you gain that like human-centric voice that we really need.
Welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name is Lewis Gray. I'm a senior marketing manager here at Disseminate. My co-host, as always, is Elliot Elsley, who is our director of revenue operations. And our very special guest today is Zach Blue. So, Zach, first and foremost, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lewis and Elliot, for having me. It's nice to be here.
Of course, it's a pleasure. And, before I jump into the various things that we're going to be talking about today, Zach, would you mind just introducing yourself for our listeners, please?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Zach Blue. I'm a talent brand and people programs leader, most recently at Meta, prior to that at Glassdoor. I'm a marketer at heart and have a big passion for employee advocacy. I'm based in Austin, Texas. That's a little bit about me.
Zach, you mentioned the role at Meta, and obviously you and I have had initial conversations coming into this, and you've been kind enough to share just some details of the employee advocacy program, what that involved, and some of the challenges and successes that came along with it. So after our initial conversation, I know I joked with you about this, but I was getting carried away with the plan because there was just so many different things that we could talk about because it kind of went from success to success by the sounds of things. And you were really involved in, I guess, demonstrating the ROI as well. In our first conversation, you mentioned about the fact that you feel the employees are a company's most underutilized marketing channel. So I think I already know the answer to this, but for our listeners, why do you feel so strongly about that?
Yeah, first, the metrics, the analyst in me is like, look at your employees' collective reach compared to your company's following. It is likely that your employees are reaching and connected to an audience that is much larger than your direct following. So that right there is like, we can disseminate messaging through our employees in ways that will further reach, company page followings. I think, employees are the trusted voice. I mean, brands can so much so show up and say, we're great. We're doing the latest and greatest. We're the best, whatever. We've got the latest. But when it's coming from an employee, which is, and a human, which is trusted, you gain that authenticity. You gain that like human-centric voice that we really need right now, in this day and age of AI. But most, I would say most companies just don't have a program around like, okay, yeah, we might believe that, but like nuts and bolts, how do we measure this and how do we, get this off the ground? And that's why I think, more and more folks are they're taking it serious. They're having to look at, creating more formalized advocacy programs to get the message out, because the reality is your salespeople, your recruiters, your employees, they are going to be connected with the buyers that you are trying to sell to, because they're having pitch calls and all of that, and they're adding everyone on LinkedIn. And the buyers, whether they're in procurement or they're sales leaders, they're following your employees, and so that's an opportunity for them to sort of drip and seep with their posting. Same with candidates. When they're interviewing, they're researching every single person on that interview loop. And so like, hello, that's like, it's prime real estate for your employees to have content about the company, have new product announcements, company updates, that kind of stuff. I mean, we're the three of us are in this world, and like we know this, but like it's just kind of really surprising to me that a lot of executives are still skeptical in this space. It's just when it comes to investing in mature advocacy programs, but we're here. It's like it's not going away.
Yeah, I think one of the big factors that I tend to see as well is corporate page metrics are grandfathered in metrics that boards and C-suite individuals know and are familiar with. They know how many, lots of followers on LinkedIn, lots of followers on X, lots of followers on Facebook is a metric that they've been familiar with now for like 10, 15 years. Employee followers, employee voice, employee things, those are metrics that just haven't been presented to anybody over the past 10 years. And it's only now that I think those are becoming normalized. So if you don't have anything to compare it against, and if you don't know what you don't know, it's a really difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people. And to your point, it's now just becoming more and more prevalent. Like, everybody's talking about it. People that started advocacy programs are moving to different businesses, and those metrics are kind of surfacing a lot more regularly. And they're the conversations that we're having now far more with people.
Well, thinking from a perspective of employee advocacy done well, and we'll definitely come into how we're tracking the ROI, especially from a talent attraction perspective. But when you look at employee advocacy success, what is it really solving for a business from your perspective, Zach?
I can speak from a perspective of course, Meta and just like broader HR. Like, as with any tool, when you bring it to an organization and you ask people to use it, I mean, adoption is, number one. So we try to make enablement super, super straightforward and easy. You have to be very clear about what the benefit is of not only like what it is, but what the user will get out of it. At Meta, this was an optional tool and program, because you're gonna have people that see a thing like an employee advocacy program. You have to share more active on LinkedIn. You got to brand yourself. Like, they're gonna opt in and be like, oh heck no, like this is not for me. I'm not active. So you're gonna get folks that opt out, but there are champions that do want to participate. And so I think it's important to lead with the what's in it for them. We expect for them to receive more of an increase in following. They get to grow their thought leadership. They get to be positioned in their networks as a leader on a specific topic. They get to potentially, from the talent acquisition lens, get more increases to be referred into the company, and that may result in a referral bonus. So you have to position the individual success, but when we look at, success up to leadership, success from a business perspective, it comes down to that reach and awareness, which, yes, the marketers care about. A lot of the leaders may care less about like followers. They're like, what's the ROI and the hard bottom line? And that's where you have to get really creative, and you got to really make best friends with your analysts and folks. And in my case, it was folks across recruiting, analytics, folks that were managing our CRM and our applicant tracking systems and the Google Analytics. We were able to do things like add tags and add source codes to shares being made by employees. And then all of a sudden, after those are in place, you have a candidate journey map. You can see that they interacted with this post, with this group, from this piece of content, with this employee. And then they went to the career site and took X action, and they started to read about jobs, and they watched this blog. And then they applied, and that's kind of been a really cool metric for us, is tying this program to applications. That's been a core measurement of success.
It's a really cool way to be able to measure it. I think anybody that is running an advocacy program is kind of missing out if they're not spending their time in GA4 and looking at these kind of UTM attributes. Is such a shame, because it's also softer elements, devoid of your conversion funnel, which is hit the careers page, submitted and applied. It's bounce rates, it's hang time, it's time on page. You generally see advocacy, people spend more time on your webpage because it's come from a person, and then all of a sudden they're more interested, rather than they've hit an ad by accident and immediately bounced off it. It's such a different world.
Quick one. If you've ever wondered how your employee advocacy efforts are actually performing and not just what you think is happening, Disseminate offers a free employee advocacy health check. All you have to do is provide your company name, and our team will pull real social data on how active your employees are, what impact it's having, and then how you stack up against your chosen competitors. So whether you're assessing the performance of your employee advocacy program or getting a benchmark for a future program, these will be the insights you can act on. The link's in the show notes. So if I take a step back for a second, Zach, thinking about the early days of the employee advocacy program at Meta, what was the original problem or gap that made you want to really dive into this and made you want to invest in employee advocacy?
Oh my gosh. I was hired on to manage partnerships, and at the time, My dear friend, still to this day, her name is Lisa O'Brien. She's the director of employer brand and recruitment marketing at Datadog. Love her. Hi, Lisa, if you're listening. She actually was the one that brought the tool into Meta. It was right around the time when I joined, and we were just growing more mature. This was Facebook, getting more mature, and we needed someone to run partnerships. So I co-partnered with Lisa on a pilot in EMEA across a couple hundred recruiters. Highly recommend pilots. Anytime you're going to take a stab and introduce a new tool into your organization, you have to pilot. That's going to make everyone feel much better. Sorry, Elliot. I know you're probably going to want people to sign up with like all employees to like start on day one, but like it's smart to do a strategic pilot and to really gather feedback, because those early adopters are going to give that feedback on what's working, what they need. But we started it in EMEA, wild success from an adoption rate perspective. So I went to some of the other recruiting teams that were managing tools, and I was like, what's a good adoption rate for, an optional program? And they're like, oh, well, like anything that hovers around like 20 to 30% is good. And the time at our advocacy tool was, I had an over 40% adoption rate. So it just let me know that like this is catching on. And it solved also for a problem. Our recruiters were coming to us and they were like, where is all this great recruitment marketing and employer brand content that y'all's team is creating? And we were having to like one-off send to people. We needed a centralized content that was tagged out, that was like categorized, where depending on if you were recruiting for software engineering or you were recruiting for sales and marketing, like you just had relevant content coming to you that was relevant for your role. And we started with that pilot in 2018, and it just like caught like wildfire. It turned into every year just like more and more user growth. I mean, big tech has fluctuations and layoffs and restructures that definitely happened at Meta. And like, if you look at usage, it was definitely it was wavy. But that's how we got started. And we were able to prove out success and secure a larger budget due to the higher adoption rates and due to just the positive feedback that was coming in through like NPS.
That's really, really good to hear. I will say, in regards to pilots, I do think they are a good thing to do at the same time. If you're currently considering disseminate, multi-year deals and non-pilots sound great. But from a pilot perspective, I think what's actually really important that you mentioned there is the size of that pilot is relevant as well. I think something people can do incorrectly, in my opinion, is run a pilot with 15 people and try to use those numbers as a reference point for scale, and it just doesn't work, and the numbers are largely pretty underwhelming. So when you say pilot at 200 people, that's a real pilot in my view.
And so, Zach, with this pilot, what were you looking to see to indicate that this was something that was worth scaling, or what proof points were you looking for to, take to leadership to let them know that it was worth scaling?
Yeah. Well, we were looking for less reach outs from recruiters asking for content. I'm just kidding. Like, I mean, but yeah, for real, like from an operations perspective, it was so much easier it became really effective to point folks to a tool that solved for that need. And to just another point that we've already echoed here, like in a day where things like paid media budget was getting very scrutinized, and like paying for promotion and budgets and everything is changing right now as our industries are changing to be more AI effective and teams are getting smaller, like you have to do more with less. I mean, that phrase, it's so sad that we have to like keep saying that, but it's like so true. So we had to come back to our teams and our leaders and say, this is effective. And by looking at the reach of this small group that's in the pilot, imagine what would happen if we increased that usage and brought it from 200 to 2,000 to 3,000 to 5,000. And we were able to estimate what that, that incremental reach would be. And that helped us, really expand this. And I'm not saying like we didn't go to unlimited seats immediately, but like we bought more than 200, and then every year it just kind of grew.
Well, Well, Zach, I'd love it if we could come back onto ROI because we've touched on it, towards the top of this episode, but I'd really love to go into the specifics because I know obviously you're measuring ROI from a talent acquisition or from a talent acquisition lens. And typically when we're talking to people on this podcast is, from a broader brand perspective. So what did measurement look like in practice with your employee advocacy program?
Yeah, when I was at Meta, it was about reach and awareness of reaching senior technical audiences to really push this message out. It truly was top of funnel, longer term candidate engagement that through employee voice, we can show the perspectives of our people. We really were creating a lot of content around the engineers that were building the wearables, that were building things like, the Meta Quest and, the headsets and the Ray-Ban glasses. And it was ultimately about reaching those audiences. But the more that we're looking at ROI, it became about how can this program generate referrals and how can it generate applications and hires. So that is all the more reason to have very robust mechanisms and tracking in place so that when activity is happening and it's driving traffic back to your career site, you're able to attribute those to the program. So that was a way that we measured like hard ROI from looking at this as a marketing channel. There's another form of a sort of indirect ROI here, which is more on the like operational side of thing, but it does come back to adoption, but it really, I look at like your advocacy program, it kind of needs to be like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you need to have a few different options for folks. There's one that's like a little cooler, and the cooler, if we're using that analogy, the nursery rhyme, it's one that like for people that are on the go that like really don't have time to create their own custom content and they're looking for a lot of help. So that's when marketers can go in and add pre-approved branded content for them to quickly share with a few minutes on a Monday with their morning cup of coffee. That's the cold. The middle porridge, the warm porridge is more like folks that do have a bit more time to do this. And maybe, they're ones that are creating their own content. I think of in America, we just had Staples Batty just go viral. Staples is an office retailer, and there was an employee that just went viral on TikTok showing off products at Staples, showing people how to make stamps. And it was like the best thing to ever happen to Staples in a long time, I think, from a marketing perspective. And so like you need to find out who those advocates are, who those brand champions are that are really willing to help carry this message forward. And you need, more of a like advanced program for them that's just beyond point and click. Maybe they're contributing content, maybe they're filming UGC. And then I think the third, like the really hot one is, more and more executives are being pushed to share their perspectives on social to humanize the brand. It's very true at companies like Meta and Google and Amazon. You're going to see a lot of the leaders in the face of, marketing, the face of engineering and AI and public affairs that are being more active on these channels. You almost need like a leadership advocacy, a thought leadership structured program that is the highest concierge service where it comes with copywriting, there's interviews, and they even need to be authenticated in a program like Disseminate so that you can see the reach and track, the measurement of their content as well. But like there's this like really hard ROI, but then there's this indirect, and the indirect is more of showing we now have a robust operational model that is getting more employees engaged. And if you have the tracking in place, you're able from, those three examples to hot in the middle and then cool, you're able to have a picture of a thriving advocacy program.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We talk about it internally and with a lot of our clients as like a stepping stone process for a lot of people as well, which is you're going to start. Some people, and I'm sure you've experienced this from an engineering perspective, you've got engineers that they're not trying to be Gary Vaynerchuk anytime soon. That's not in their interest in any way, shape or form. They want to help, they want to assist. Maybe they just want to like something on LinkedIn. That might be a step for them just towards being kind of more active on social, has an impact, has a net benefit, which is they've liked it, their audience will start to see that because there's a soft like that's occurred, all of those things. That stepping stone is getting them to a point where maybe they do post something onto social,
Absolutely.
and taking all of these different people, this full range of social media enthusiasm, and being able to provide as much as possible to all of those different areas. To your point, the executives that need hand holding and need the white glove, the people that don't really want to do it but understand they should, the people that wouldn't know their LinkedIn password if you ask them to log in. It's all these variations of people that you have to be able to handle.
Your program needs to meet each of them. And so what we did is we built a training module in our version of, like, I say our, but in Meta's version of like Confluence, or like, the company knowledge center, right in there with the onboarding materials where folks learn about various policies and procedures. You should be creating an employee advocacy page that promotes your program, whether it's, with a tool like Disseminate or others. But new hires in their new hire onboarding should be, they just accepted an amazing offer at your company. Of course, they are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and excited to talk about their experience and push and show impact and show value. So like, a great opportunity there. But like, yes, it does become about the hard ROI and metrics. But like, if you truly are a great program manager, or you're thinking about this in a systems way, you're not looking at just what is this program delivering? You're looking at it also in how is it easing our relationships with comms? How is it informing content strategy and lowering production budgets because we're not creating content that may not ever get used? Because now we know what really is resonating through, additional data points from employee advocacy on the kind of productions we need to be investing in. How is this, like, is it increasing referrals? And so like, you have to just look at it, especially in this age of AI too, like, are you relying less on agencies to create copy for you? And are there budget savings? Are you able to show cost avoidance through a program like this? So I will share that, yeah, we were looking at total clicks generated from employee advocacy. And you can go to LinkedIn and you can see if you're engaged in paid media, or you can even ask probably any AI chatbot today what the average cost per clicks are on some of these leading platforms. For senior technical engineers on LinkedIn, you can be paying anywhere between like $5 to $12 a click. It's very expensive to market to senior AI ML engineers. But guess what? If your employees are sharing, their clicks are like 90% less than that. Like, it's actually, there's no cost. I mean, there's ways for you to factor in costs, obviously. Elliot, you can help them with that. And you can say like, cost of your employee advocacy program, and so like, here's what you're spending. But like, it's going to be nowhere near that cost per click. So like, you have to think of it in a systems way. It's not just about like pushing content out. It's like truly informing several other areas of strategy, messaging, copy, creative direction, and comms.
Zach, something that you mentioned in our initial conversation is something that I really wanted to come back onto, and it was that you mentioned most companies don't actually have a content problem. So, for our listeners' sake, can you just explain what you mean by that?
There is a long-held belief that in order to do a program like this, you need to hire someone to create content for this. Um, I really have a hard time believing that. And you may say, well, like, you worked at large tech companies that like had many marketing teams. That is very true. But I just think you have employees that are so ready and are already creating content. They're already attending your events and sales kickoffs, and they are attending recruiting events and industry events. You have a full-time marketing team that is probably investing heavily in large scale productions on certain products and brand identities and brand systems. Um, every one of your employees has a phone in their hand. So I really have a hard time believing that people are like, well, we just don't have someone to manage content for this. Like, you have some of the world's top emerging AI tools at your hands, even if it's just text only, and you're starting out with questions that come in the form of a poll or maybe you're taking, you're building off questions around the employee experience or your employer value proposition and testing messaging through text only posts. Like, uh, there's features on LinkedIn's platform that allows you to see employee trending content they are posting. So like I just don't believe that people have a content problem. And if you think that you have one, I've been there and I see where you're coming from, but like you're probably thinking of it as like we need to create all of this new brand approved content that's like really flashy and polished and it sounds really expensive and I don't have a budget. And I'm like, that's actually not what people want to see anymore. Like actually LinkedIn is deprioritizing content from brands. So if you're going big on those really flashy productions that are coming from your company page, it's probably not going to get seen that much versus content shared by creators or AKA your employees. So that's what I meant when I said that.
I think just finally on this point as well, when you're considering the end product, your employee advocacy program, the content that you're curating for employees, you need to be giving them content they actually want to share first and foremost. Like if you want your employees to actually start posting on social media, they don't want to feel like walking billboards with a pulse
Yep.
effectively. They want to be sharing third party content. They want to be seen as industry experts. And, you know, they're more likely to share content that's been created by their colleagues as well. But just on that point, Zach, how do you help those employees who maybe are interested in creating or just posting but don't know where to start?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you're not an executive at a very large, tech company, the executives are spokespeople. So a lot of times what they can say is, they act as spokespeople, but below typically director, individual contributors, they're not official. I mean, they represent the company, but they're not official spokespeople for the Googles of the world. So we typically lean with a, voice and choice. You represent the company, speak with respect and authenticity, but speak about topics that are most important to you. And so we would do trainings. We would we people want a lot of data, we find. So a lot of times we would get asked like, well, what should I be speaking about? Like what's most exciting, to this audience? And that's where like we can lean on partners like Disseminate and LinkedIn and some of the players to help show like what's resonating most around your target audience. I think you really do have to understand like who's the target audience that we're each reaching. That should be done first. But like and then there's just general like feedback sessions. Feedback is such a gift. If you come in with an idea of like, I have this idea of how I want this program to run, and I'm going to do it like there's just walls up. You have to bring all of your people and employees along the way the entire time and continue to get feedback. Find out what content they want to promote. Let's be real. Your salespeople are going to want content that is going to inspire their buyer to buy. So like, recruiters are going to want content that features likely perspectives or the teams sort of lifts the veil behind the teams that they're hiring for so that they can help, with content to inspire and ultimately help close that deal. They want to hear from leaders. I think everyone wants to hear from leaders on company direction and vision. I think especially now that AI, the pace at which it is changing our industry significantly, folks want to see and learn how companies are building with AI ethics and safety. So like, it is up to you, but it is also up to you to work with your leaders and your marketing and your CEO and their direction. What is the direction of the company that is most inspiring? Where are we going? And then from there trickles down, the content that that would get developed for this type of thing.
And I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I've got one final question for you. But Zach, thanks in advance for being so generous with your time today. We've run ever so slightly over, but what's the biggest win that you've seen from employee advocacy?
The biggest win was just when I received a reach out from a recruiter that they received a DE&I hire from a candidate that engaged with our content through the program. I mean, that sounds like really small. I mean, there's been several, but like it's those personal things that connect. I like, hey, this program made my job, helped me like hit my goal, and brought a unique perspective into the company. I was so excited when um the program was promoted in the company rebrand Collateral. So there were some really big like tentpole moments where this program that we built was promoted company wide. So like that kind of feels good and prideful. Like people are really taking care of this. But those are just some of the wins. I mean, there's macro and micro. But Lewis, I mean, just to echo what you were saying, this has been so fun. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to do this again anytime. And you guys got like such a cool thing going over there at Disseminate, and I'm just really appreciative to be a part of this.
Oh, bless you, Zach. And the feeling's mutual. We'll get a Zach Blue part 2 one day, I'm sure. And we can unpack some other topics. But Zach, genuinely, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.